Good morning. I tried to introduce myself to as many of you who came through this door as possible, and we're going to talk about what's next. I'm a very informal presenter. I'm not your traditional presenter, and so we're going to start with this. I want to thank you for being here. You had a choice this morning. You didn't have to come to this. You could be back in your hotel room sleeping in. You could be outside dealing with the humidity. You could be having an early morning adult beverage in your coffee, but you've chosen to be here. And I respect that, I appreciate it, and I want to thank you in advance for your mental engagement. I am here for you. You are not here for me. Let's get this straight right off the bat. So I'm going to make an agreement with you. In this presenter-attendee agreement, I believe in the law of motion. If at any time this presentation veers in a direction that doesn't meet your needs, you get a text, you get a phone call, you get bored, you don't like it, you need to stand up, you want to get out of here, you have the right to do that. Do not feel like you need to tell me in advance, I'm leaving early, but it's not anything to do with you. I am here for you, you are not here for me. We have it backwards. Presenters are here for the audience, for the learners. So you have the right and my invitation to take care of your needs. You're adults, take care of your needs. Bathroom, somebody tell me where they are in case I need to run to one. Where are they? Okay, thanks, this way. I ain't running that way. I think there's one back here. Put those mobile devices on vibrate, please. Please put them on vibrate. This is a session where texting, typing, and social sharing is welcome. You may social share anything I say. You can use Twitter, Facebook, take pictures, anything you want. You may not social share anything anybody else in the room says unless they give you permission, okay? The presenter-attendee agreement, I believe in Twitter. If somebody in here is going to be tweeting, I'm going to ask you to use the golden rule this morning. Tweet unto others as you'd have them tweet unto you. And I'm going to ask you to do this. Tweet something good before you tweet anything bad, okay? And finally, well, let's make understanding the goal. I'm going to talk to you about the biology of learning. The biology of learning, and we're going to talk about how to take all this stuff you've taken in for the past couple of days and use it back on your job. So understanding is critical. And I'm going to declare that this is a safe space. You're allowed to disagree with me. You're allowed to push back on me. You're allowed to question and doubt. I know that's critical for learning. And finally, you get a free pass. You may use this free pass as frequently and as often as you like, because I'm going to ask you to do some things. And if you don't want to do it, just tell your neighbor you're using your free pass, all right? So if that works for you, give me a thumbs up. If it doesn't work for you, thumbs down. Don't care, thumbs sideways. I will wait till I see thumbs. All right, I've got you doing that. Here's a little bit about me. I'm a nonprofit junkie. I spent most of my life here in Texas. I live in Dallas now. I love San Antonio. I used to live in Corpus Christi, and I've lived in Austin. Most of my life I spent running education and meetings for nonprofit associations. I took a 3-year stint here in Texas in Austin as a political aide, where I wrote speeches for the 3rd highest ranking political official here in Texas. I'm a meeting and event professional. My background is education. My post-baccalaureate work is in the study of andragogy. Anybody in the room know what that is? You have no idea, right? Andragogy. Pedagogy? Is that one getting closer? How about a pediatrician? You know what a pediatrician is, right? What's a pediatrician? A child doctor. Pedagogy is the art and science of teaching children. The art and science of teaching children. Andragogy is the study of how the human adult brain learns. It has nothing to do with the teaching aspect. It has to do with the learning aspect. So, about 5 years ago, I had to unlearn everything I had learned in college because it was wrong. That's hard. The science came out. We now have 20 to 30 years of research of what works with learning and what doesn't work. We know what happens in the brain, what parts of the brain light up, what the process is that has to happen for you to learn something so that you'll apply it. I had to unlearn everything I had been teaching for years and based my life on. Learning, unlearning, and relearning are the 3 critical skills you need for your future. So here's what I'd like for you to do. I hope you're sitting near somebody. If you're not, you might want to get up and move. I would like for you to talk to your neighbor on your right or left. The best thing about San Antonio is what? Turn to your neighbor on your right or your left, in front of you or behind you. What's the best thing about San Antonio that you've experienced so far? Do that now. Okay, so let's talk about this as a group. Just looking for a couple people that just will shout out to me, what's the best thing that you've experienced about San Antonio so far? Mexican food. Margaritas, yes. I love watermelon. Guess where I'm going with this? I love watermelon margaritas. But I call myself a tequila snob. I learned early on in life the higher priced tequilas, you don't have the hangovers that you do from the cheaper tequilas. The longer the tequila has aged, the smoother it is going down and the more I drink. Margaritas, absolutely. And if you've not had a margarita and you drink adult beverages, you must have one while you're here in San Antonio. Go get one. So this is where some of the information I'm going to give you today is coming from. I'm going to take some of what you've been doing for the past 2 days and wrap it up, but I'm taking some science. One of the organizations, is there anybody here from UT? Anybody here from UT? Yes. Part of where I spent my grad studies. UT Dallas and the chancellor of UT in January 2 years ago declared that for the next 10 years, we're going to be studying the health of our brains. We are entering into the neuroscience field. We're entering into what's happening because the brain has been unexplored. This book here, Make Your Brain Smarter, comes from Dr. Sandra Bond Chapman. She is the founder and the originator of the Brain Health Institute in Dallas and the Center for Brain Improvement, which is the translational arm of the research from neuroscience. It's all about what's working in the neuroscience field and how to put it to work in your lives, personally, professionally, businesses, and organizations. I've grown fond of this organization because they take high-level research and help somebody like me put it into practice so that I can ward off early dementia and early Alzheimer's. We're going to practice some of these principles today. Learning without thought is labor lost. Thought without learning is perilous. Here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to summarize the critical 2017 plant pathology findings and elaborate on how to apply them. You're going to do this, not me. We're going to explore the latest neuroscience and cognitive psychology findings of the biology of learning. We're going to identify actionable key takeaways from this week that you can apply. By the end of this presentation, I hope you're able to do one of these on your own. So I call them learner outcomes. This presentation was designed with the outcomes in mind first and designed backwards. Here's the 3, and this is the only time you'll see this many words from me on the screen. Take a look at these 3. Which one of these 3 interests you the most and why? Which one of these 3 interests you the most personally and professionally and why? Would you turn to your neighbor on your right or your left or in front of you or behind you and talk to them about which one of these 3 interests you the most and why? Do that now. Okay, here's my question. How many of you, number 1 interests you? Raise your hands. Really? You don't want to summarize anything from this meeting. You were here for the food. How many of you, number 2 interests you? Raise your hands for me. Interesting. How many of you, number 3 interests you most? Raise your hands. Okay. Any brave souls in the room willing to say more than one of these interests you? Would you raise your hands for me? Just a few of you. Any braver souls in the room willing to say none of this interests you? I'm serious. So I would suggest you go spend your time somewhere else. Let's not waste your time. Why would this be important to you? What's in this presentation for the next 30, 45 minutes for you? Well, I believe that you're all leaders. You're the silent heroes of our society. People don't understand what you do for a living, and you're pretty quiet about it. And this is the last thing we want to have happen, both in our society and in your roles as potholes in life. We want to be the leaders. I happen to know that if something were to happen within the plant species in our world, you would be the ones we would turn to help fix it. We would need your wisdom and insight. So what's in this presentation is how do you lead as kind of the introverted leader, the silent, behind-the-scenes stage hero. Believe it or not, I'm an introvert. I've learned to survive in an extroverted world. I can be extroverted when need be. And I think this leadership thing is really critical. Even if you're a silent leader and you lead by serving and you lead by helping us, we need you. So what's in this presentation is how to take what's happening here and own it. So here's my questions for you. What's next? What are you becoming? What are you worth?
Well, Jeff, I think I have an answer to that. Everything has cost, and everything has worth. $1. There you go. 4 quarters? You don't want 4 quarters? 4 quarters, he'll take it. There you go. There we go. 10 dimes. 20 nickels, 100 pennies. Or if you're feeling kind of fancy, 5 dimes, 5 nickels and a quarter, right? 20 pennies, 10 nickels, 3 dimes, change the order. You'll still find that 1 quarter, 2 dimes, and 11 nickels, no matter what you call her, she'll always end up $1. Now, this singular rectangular piece of government printed paper has, by its very nature, both cost and worth. And you know how much it costs because you know how much it's worth, right? 27 pennies, 1 quarter, 3 nickels, 2 dimes, and those 3 more copper coins on the couch cushions that you thought you lost will always be worth $1 because you know how much $1 costs, right? It's intrinsically linked, like an ocean to its beach, like a mouth to its speech, like an arm to its reach. The cost and worth of this cotton woven purse are tied tighter than the fibers of its manufactured birth. $1 is always worth $1. That's right. But what about you? What are you worth? Now, I'm not talking about assets or investments or whether or not your salary is enough to land you on the Forbes list. When I ask this, what are you worth? I'm not asking, what do you cost? Because I happen to believe that we as human beings are worth far more than we cost. But that's not what comes across when we only give in worth what we take in cost, right? $80,000 a year, 40 hours a week, one satisfied boss, that's what you cost. But if you look at your job, like I hope you will, you'll see that many of us don't view ourselves any differently than we view this dollar bill. And neither will those around you, because as long as you measure your worth by the measure of your cost, you'll never look any different from the millions of printed dollar bills coming off the American mill, because not working for your worth but working for your cost is not how businesses win, it's how they are lost. Because people aren't looking for face value, but for someone who will give more in value than what the face actually costs. Take this conference, for example. Is it only worth what you paid to be part of this meeting? Or is its true worth found in what everyone who's been speaking and you've been speaking to have been bringing? When you go home and a coworker says, hey, how did it go? Will you just hand them an expense report thinking that's all you have to show? No. You'll tell them the value found in coming to join in over 1,000 strong, seeing what can be done when we link arms. And if you want to talk about a worth that seldom gets its full cost, let's talk about you. Because you are our food's guards who get far too little regard. You are our battlers of extinction who deserve far more distinction. You are our supply chain defenders, our sustainability inventors who deserve so much more than just to be remembered. You are our plant problem solvers, our spore and pathogen scholars who are worth so much more than any number of dollars. For instance, what you do is worth so much more than the 50 cents I pay for an apple at a grocery store. For whether it was through science, extension, or teaching, that piece of fruit has a rich, far more than 50-cent history. In what growing season was it formerly constrained? What country originally produced that produce in which it was formerly contained? What disease would have killed it if you had not knocked out its strain? What chemical would have had to be used on it if you had not built resistance into its DNA? What you have done is worth so much more than what I have spent. But the beauty of the value you create is that I can still buy that same apple for just 50 cents. Now, I'm not even going to begin to pretend that I can comprehend all the pesticides you've trialed, all the bacterias you filed, all the fungi in your catalog, all the cultures in your collective repertoire. I cannot overemphasize your value, even with all my poetic emphasis. For you are high impact, but low visibility. You're like the very process of photosynthesis. For what you've done, by doing what you've done, you've built a giant hole of debt that all my words of thanks cannot even begin to fill. So all I can hope to do is remind you that you are not a dollar bill. And as you start to give more in worth than what you're paid, what you cost will build. It's not about how much interest you make to accumulate more wealth, but about how much interest you place in others above the interest you place in yourself. It's not about how many greenbacks you get, but about how many people you give value to and how much value you give to each and every one of them, because you are not a piece of paper that people spend in order to get something else. Your most valuable asset isn't just doing what you're paid to do, but the value you give out of yourself. And as you start to give more in worth than you take in payment, get ready. Because there will always be someone affected by your worth, not your cost, who will honor your abasement. So don't be the paper, be the poem. Don't be the payment, be the motion. Don't be the dollar, be the words. Don't be the cost, be the worth. Because when you start to give more in worth than you take when you're bought, you can finally let go of that wretched thing known as cost. Thank you very much.
That was David Bowden poetry. Can you tell this is not your normal general session? Can you also tell that we wanted to mix things up? It was intentional. He came from the back of the room. Some of you were still waiting for something to happen up here. Who made the rule that presentations have to start up here? Who made that rule? And why did we do that? What are we worth? What are you worth? I didn't understand half of what he said because it was in your words and your language, but I got the gist of it. You even laughed at the right place. Who said plant scientists were dull? You are some of the most passionate people around, but you rarely share with others the value of what you're doing. What are you worth? I'd like for you to turn to your neighbor on your right or your left and tell them, what are you worth? You do that now. Talk to your neighbor on your right or your left. What are you worth? Okay, let's talk about this as a group. Just a housekeeping rule. That money that David was throwing around like it was worthless, we need to collect it back because it came from your foundation. And so here's my question and my ask of you. If he handed you one of those dollars, would you reach in your wallet or purse and match it with another dollar? Let's give the foundation double what they gave us for that presentation, okay? Please, and and one other thing, I'm looking for a couple brave souls that'll go up on stage and collect all those dollars. I won't make you match everything that's on the stage. Come on, I'm looking for a couple of volunteers. I'm serious, we got to do this. We need to get this money back. Thank you. Here's one. And then, okay, we got two. All right, three. That's good. So while they're doing that, I'm looking for a couple of volunteers who will share with us, because I suddenly thrust you into telling somebody else what you're worth. That's out of your comfort zone, right? That's not normal for you. You rarely are cocky people, right? But you should be proud of what you do. I'm proud for you. You should own it. And the only way the rest of the world is ever going to know the value you have. Thanks, guys. All right.
Others.
If you want to match it, they're going to walk down the aisles and you just hand them $1. So I'm looking for a couple volunteers who are willing to share with us what you told others about what you're worth. I'll do it. Thank you. Do you want to tell them what you're worth? He said a lot. Looking for a couple volunteers. Come on. Looking for some brave souls. What are you worth? Okay, so anybody? We've got a mic here. We're going to run with a mic. Thank you. Look, okay, we've got one here. We've got one here. Okay, we're coming. Tell them your name and who you're with.
I'm Darren Eastburn, University of Illinois. I got an email from a former student about a month ago who's now just started as a graduate student at Iowa State. And he said, I just wanted to let you know that I took your class a couple of years ago and it changed my life. And now I'm starting on a new career as a graduate student. And it just made it really all worthwhile for me and what I do as a teacher.
Wow. Did you hear that? Life changers. You're life sustainers as well. Yes, sir. Tell us your name and who you're with.
Jerry Weiland, USDA ARS. We've got a group here who don't think we're worth very much. And so then we were spending time boosting each other like, oh, I think you're great. But I think individually, there are several of us who don't think we're worth very much. But the other people see the value.
Yep. I would suggest to you and submit to you, we've got to fix that. Because your value is pretty important. I see that. When I first started talking with Betty, and I'm with Velvet Chainsaw, the cool company named Velvet Chainsaw Consulting. I'm the Velvet side of the Velvet Chainsaw Consulting. When I started working with and finding out what you did, I was like, how come I don't know who you are? You're so important. And believe it or not, I was in North Dakota a couple weeks ago with another client who gets you, the National Farmers Union. I was working with the state leaders from the National Farmers Union. When they found out that I was coming to present, they said, we understand them very well because they help us keep sustainability of food for people in the world. They get you. Small family-owned farmers get you. Wow, what are you worth? Okay, who else? Any other volunteers? So let's move on. Thank you very much for playing. And those of you that have money, I'm assuming you're going to give it to one of the board members or give it to Betty. The brain avoids thinking. If this morning when I started asking you to do something, you had this feeling, ugh, really? Can't I just sit here and be quiet and listen? Your brain is built to avoid thinking, believe it or not. The way your brain is built is that when information comes in from the five senses, it comes in from the five senses, it goes to the hippocampus, it goes to the thalamus, and then it goes to a small almond-shaped part of your brain. It's in the back part of your brain. It's called the amygdala. I remember how to spell it because it's Amy G. Dalla. That's how to spell it. It's pronounced amygdala. Will you just say the word amygdala? Say the word, amygdala. So I call it Amy for short. Amy is neither male nor female. Let's get that straight. But people who work with me, we have this common language about Amy. Amy has preference and hierarchical treatment. Amy's the part of your brain that did not evolve with the rest of your brain. Amy's the part of your brain that just in case a prehistoric dinosaur or a tiger or somebody with a weapon runs into this room, Amy takes over. And you go into fight, flight, freeze, flee, or sexual reproduction. That's the fifth F. Some of you got it. Did you hear the delay? Some people got it later. It happens all the time. Amy will not give up the body's resources for you to think. Because when you think, you use 20 to 25% of the calories you burn each day. Oxygen, blood, proteins, and glucose. And Amy wants to hold on to those just in case Amy perceives a threat. Amy's not logical at all. Amy's very illogical. And regardless of you being scientists and logical people, I bet you've had this happen to you. You get an email from a boss or a superior or a colleague or a client or a relative, and you read it. It doesn't set too well with you. And you do this. Send. And you feel so good about it, you even walk to somebody else, or you pick up the phone and you call them and you say, do you know what this person just did? Well, here's what I did. I'm gathering by the laughter, you've had that experience? That's Amy's fault. Amy has the control. And when we have an emotional hijack, your body is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline for 40 minutes. And you cannot think logically for 40 minutes. 40 freaking minutes you should not be around another human being. You should not make any decisions. But here's the thing. Amy can take control of your learning. And Amy will say, I don't see anything of value in that presentation. He wants you to talk about what it's worth. Not doing it. We're not giving up the body's resources. No. And some of you are so used to sitting in a theater like this and letting a presenter give you the information and give you their knowledge as if it's a spoken word, and you walk out and go, check, done. I feel good. I got it. You didn't get it. The University of Vermont. Anybody here from the University of Vermont? Banned lectures this past week in their medical school. Are you ready for that? The doctors aren't going to be lectured to. They still have to pass tests. University of Texas Southwest, up in the Dallas area medical school, 2013, changed their entire medical process so that doctors, people coming into the medical arena, right off in year one, they're thrust into real-world situations with patients and have to serve on teams of people with all various degrees, and suddenly are part of a process making decisions about what's going on in people's lives. Some of you go, I'm not sure I want that. Well, don't worry, that person doesn't have final say. However, they're bringing in ideas. They're not barricaded by the rules. You hear where I'm going with this? And they've realized that the lecture is of little value. There's so much research that the lecture doesn't work. And this is where I'm going to really offend some of you. And I apologize for stepping on toes ahead of time. If you truly understood the biology of your brain and how learning works, you would not sit through listening to somebody talking to you unless you're taking notes and doing some very specific things to make it yours. So you select the baby that gets your attention. You have control over this, which comes at a cost. Your brain minimizes the energy it spends on thinking. It does not exceed the value of thinking, the trade-off. You have a battle in your world. You have this battle between accuracy and effort. Because you're scientists, your entire life is based on the scientific method. And you're all about being right. And guess what? The neuroscience of the brain is it loves being right. When you are right, a spouse, a loved one, a good friend, and you tell them something and they just don't believe you, and later they come back to you and you so much want to say to you, I told you so. The brain actually releases dopamine when you're right. The brain is built to be right. And we can retrain the brain. But here's what happens. When the amygdala is involved, which is where dopamine is released, when the back part of your brain gets involved with this short, I'm right, or yes, an emotional wow. David was a great emotional wow. He connected with you in a different way that you've never thought of. And had we told you that was going to happen, you wouldn't have shown up. right? For many of you, I'm at a scientific conference and we're gonna have a rapper come in. What? But it got your attention, didn't it? It engaged the limbic system of your brain. And it connected you on an emotional level. And that's a good thing. The challenge is, when we only stay there, we shut down the prefrontal cortex of our brain, the executive functions of the brain. It's where you do most of your work. Synthesis, analysis, evaluation, judgment. And if you stay back here with this emotional stuff, you get addicted to the dopamine drip. Some of you are already thinking about, well, how are they going to top this session next year? Dopamine drip. And instead, we have to start thinking, how do we get you to think? Remember at the beginning I asked you for your mental engagement? The brain defaults to memory and past experiences and habits. Dr. Bowden Chapman would tell you, defaulting to habits and the past as the only way to do something causes early dementia and early Alzheimer's. Now, if that doesn't freak you out, have you ever driven home from work, assuming you don't work out of your house? Have you ever, or if you work out of your house, you've gone to the grocery store and come back? Unless you, like me, I don't even go to the grocery store anymore. I just order it online, have it delivered. I'm serious. The farmers did not like that. I said, trust me, I go to the farmer's market. However, have you ever driven home from work or from somewhere that you go all the time, and you pull into your driveway or parking garage and you pull out the keys and you go, crap, I don't remember driving home? Have you done that? That's not good. And here's what the research says. It's actually very bad for your brain, because your brain has done something so much the same way all the time that it goes into automatic pilot. It's called automation. And it doesn't think about it. Well, you're not thinking about driving. Your mind is not there. What happens if there's an accident that happens in front of you? You know, that's a distraction. But the brain, the amygdala, will say, don't use the body's resources, go into automation, you've done this all the time. The research is now saying you should drive home different ways all the time to keep the brain engaged. Really? I don't know, do you want dementia early or not? Dr. Bowden Chapman would tell you, don't you dare do it. So, this is one of the reasons your brain avoids change. This is one of the reasons why we default in our conferences and meetings to the same way it's been done for hundreds of years. This is why we default in colleges and universities to a lecture with an audience. But I'm telling you, the disruption is happening very fast. We go back to these plans. This is why I've always done it. So this has got to be right. And we never contextualize it for today, because today is not the same as yesterday. Would you agree with that? And tomorrow is not going to be the same as today. So this mindset of we have to do it this way doesn't work unless it's a principle or a system that is evergreen. So, you know, our brain likes something that's the most rewarding. And here's what Dr. Bowden Chapman, Dr. John Medina would tell you. Do the opposite of what your brain wants to do. Did you catch that? Do the opposite of what your brain wants to do. Your brain remembers certain things. So here's my question for you. How will you keep from returning to the past? How will you keep from returning to the past? I believe that you're here because this is your community, this is your tribe, this is where you feel safe, this is where you commiserate, this is where you complain, this is where you encourage each other, and there's no place else in the world where you can go where you can do that. It's here, and you pay to do that. So how do you keep evolving this conference experience to get your brain to think? Because for me, I don't care on the evaluations if you were happy with my presentation or you enjoyed it. To me, that's a failure. I care if I made you think. No thinking, no learning. How are you going to keep from returning to the past? And how are you going to be willing to do new things? Do the opposite of what your brain wants to do. Your brain wants to do the same thing the same way. Now, sometimes it works. I have a routine every morning. I bet you do too. We just go out into it. I travel for a living. I have a routine for packing my suitcase. And where my suitcase stays, where everything is that I can put in it. I screwed up yesterday when I was flying down here. I got out of my routine, and I knew it. And I got at the airport, and I went, oh, darn. I'm missing something, but I don't know what I'm missing. You have that feeling? I forgot all my toiletries. So don't get too close. I don't smell great. How will you keep from returning to the past? I would like for you to turn to your neighbor on your right or your left. Now, here's the other thing. I'm asking you some hard questions, and they're uncomfortable questions. They're not questions you normally deal with. But here's what the research says. If you will wrestle with it and struggle with it, you retain it more. Telling you what to do doesn't mean you're going to do it. If you have a spouse or kids, you already know this. Turn to each other really quickly, and then we're going to go to your handout. How will you keep from returning to the past, and what new things are you willing to try? Talk to each other real quickly. Okay, so we're going to move to your worksheet, because I want you to wrap up some things here. What one thing from this event the past few days do you want to remember when you get back to your job? What one thing really has stuck with you? I'm not saying from this presentation. I'm talking about the whole time you've been here. What is one piece of information that's really critical that you want to remember? I want you to write it on the back of that handout that we gave out. There's a handout there. I want you to write it down. What's one thing? Come on, there's got to be one. And if you don't have one, wow. I often say, you know, we'll pay to go to a conference. Well, our employers pay for us to go to conferences. Let's get this straight. Some of you paid out of your own pocket. A typical conference runs anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 when you count airfare, food and beverage, registration, et cetera. And we say, if I can get one takeaway, it was worth it. Our bar is really low. We'll spend 3 or 4 days at a conference, and we look for one. Wow, the bar's low. What's the one thing? Write it down. So I'm going to assume that you have something. Something. I want you to envision your future self. Okay? I want you to envision your future self using that one thing. You got where I'm going with this? Your future self using that one thing. What will you need back at your job to put that one thing into practice? What are some things you need? The tools. Look back at your worksheet. Will you write that down? If you'll flip it back over now, there's envisioning your future self. I want you to envision your future self, putting that into practice. Here's the thing. Your brain doesn't know real from fake, and it doesn't know future from now. When you take your brain in the future, it thinks it's happening now. It's kind of hard for us to imagine, but you do this all the time. You plan vacations. You plan holidays. You plan where you're going to go with family and friends. You envision your future all the time. But when we talk about it in this regard, oh, God, no. Yes. And then what skill set are you going to need? What are the tools you need? Here's the thing. My presentation, there's a lot more in here. I'm not about covering content. I do not believe covering content equals learning. This is your 2-pound brain. Would you everybody put your hands together for me like this? I want to teach you a high-level academic thing about your brain, the biology of your brain, really quickly, but I'm going to do it through mnemonic. You can go Google later to see if I'm right. Dr. James Zull is where this comes from. This is your 2-pound brain. The information comes in from the 5 senses. Goes to the hippocampus, the thalamus, and the amygdala. And then it goes to your brain stem. So I want you to wiggle your thumbs. Information is coming in all the time. This is the back part of your brain. This is the limbic system that loves the dopamine, the neural addictions that we have. So you wiggle that. Is that learning? Nope. Not at all. It's a start. Now, I want you to put your pointer finger up. It's not until your brain focuses on the information and points to it, gives it attention, does the learning process really start. Your brain is always receiving information. Some of you have listened to the drone of this air condition that's up here on the stage during this presentation. Some of you had no idea. Until I just pointed out, you didn't even realize it was going on. But your brain has been receiving that information and dropping it because it's not important. You haven't done this. So you have to point to it and connect it to your experiences and your knowledge. Now, give it the bird. This is where the brain goes, WTF, what does this freaking mean to me? Some of you are there, and you were there from the very beginning of this. What does this mean to me? It's called sense making. Unless you make sense of the information, no learning occurs. Are you getting this? And yet, what do we do to students or presentations? We get stuck here. Now, we're still not through. You have to receive the information. You have to connect it, point to it, connect it to your past experiences and your knowledge and your mental models that you have in your brain that become your biases. And then you have to make sense of it. Lastly, I want you to point to your, wheel your pinkies. And then you have to act on it. Acting on it can be writing it or talking about it. The research now shows that the people who do the most talking in the room have done the most learning. Ouch. That's a speaker. The people who've done the most talking in the room have done the most learning because they're processing the information. Presentations are designed logically because, come on, you're scientists. Everything's got to be logically. You do not learn linearly. You do not learn A plus B is C. Your learning is not linear. The brain jumps around topics from lots of different perspectives. It's called jumbling. And if we want learning to occur, naturally, the way the brain is built biologically, you jumble information up. Oh my God, no, I don't get it. Exactly, because we make the brain figure out the connections of it. But you do this naturally. You're evolving in the science all the time, are you not? Doesn't the science continue to evolve as the world continues to progress? So I tell you this because I hope that for the rest of today, I don't want you to get obsessed with this. I don't want you to focus on it so much you don't think about anything else. But if you will allow your brain to do what it does, and you will do this, and then you'll put it aside, you get your best ideas oftentimes when? In the shower? When you wake up, right? Because the brain has naturally processed the information, and the brain does what it does. So I'm going to encourage you, go to look at the rest of the slide deck. And I know that some of you are going to be mad. You're going to put on the evaluations. He didn't tell me how to do it, because that wouldn't help. You have to struggle with this. You have to wrestle with it. You have to go, I'm not there yet. You have to get mad at me. You have to walk out and tell off the board, which some of you are going to do, because it happens everywhere, because your brain wants to avoid thinking. What your brain likes to do and why you should do the opposite. If you can learn metacognition, learning about learning, you will have the best skill set next to learning, unlearning, and relearning that will help you survive in the coming years. Because learning has to continue. I hope that during this presentation, you've seen something a little bit different. We got your attention. We knew how to do that. But more than that, we wanted to connect with your heart and your soul and your brain. So as you're leaving this session today, I would like for you to do, and you're not leaving yet, so there's got to wrap up. But when you leave, I'm going to ask you to do this. I'm going to ask you to do a talk and walk. I'm going to ask you to grab somebody and say, well, how'd that work out for you? I don't know. He's not a scientist. I haven't told you anything about my background. But I have brought science from the learning field to you in lay terms. I could give it to you in academic terms. Because that discussion that you have leaving this is where the learning may occur. What we need to start doing in meetings like this is bringing that discussion that happens in the hallways and at the bars into the meeting, and figuring out how to do it even in general sessions like this. this scales with 12,000 people or 10. Because it's all about what you're doing, not about the presenter. Most presentations are designed for delivery of information, not for the way the audience is going to learn it. Are you catching the shift? And in your role, you're going to do presentations a lot to students, but also to lots of people. If you can get this piece down, this skill set, you can walk away realizing how important reflection is in comparing what you used to do and what you do now, and where your mental model is stuck. And if you are stuck there and you disagree with me, I'm just going to ask you to put it aside. Somewhere down the road, you might be able to think about it a little bit differently, because then I hijacked Amy. So today, we're going to wrap up. I'm going to turn it back over to your team. Thank you very much for your time, your participation. You played along, and we appreciate it.